All right, welcome to Live America podcast. This is Hatem. Great episode tonight. Crazy world we live in. We see the wars with the war with Iran escalating, U.S. and Israel strikes, retaliation all over. Other worlds, Ukraine. I mean, it's crazy world right now. So this episode is about the intelligent world that decision makers rely on to make their decision and make the world when the world on the line and they have to make a decision. They need information. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And a bonus, which I think is very interesting, how we can apply this to everyday's life. So I got the perfect guest for us. Our guest is Trenton Miguez. He's a former U.S. military intelligence officer who operated in high-risk environment across the Middle East, supporting counterterrorism, threat reduction, de-escalation, and more. His work combined with intelligent collection, analysis, decision making, all under pressure and all that. And now this is the foundation of his work right now, where he helped the next generation of intelligent officers and also teach leaders in the business world and the real world, how to think, decide, especially when the information is not complete. So, like I said, the perfect guest for what's going on. Trenton, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, brother.
So, crazy world, huh?
Very much.
So we will start first with the intelligent world, or for as intelligent officer and with the wars and all this going on, what is more dangerous in your opinion? We're gonna break down the intelligence, everything, but I want to start with this. What is more important in your opinion, not having information or believing information that is completely wrong?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't ever been asked that. What do I think is more important or is it
Dangerous.
dangerous?
Yeah,
Bad intel versus incomplete intel is basically what you're saying.
pretty much. Yeah.
I think obviously it would be the bad intel, right? Because when you commit to an action, there's cascading effects from that resulting action, right? You know this in your personal relationships, you know this in your business, definitely in your business relationships, right? Every action that you decide to undertake has effects. Those effects have trade-offs, right? Of different and unique circumstances that you then have to deal with. And you can what's called an OODA loop cycle, or essentially a act and react cycle. So if you make a decision that is based on bad information, you've already encapsulated yourself within this cycle where you're acting and now you're reacting to essentially a bad decision, right? So that means you not only have to make sense of what you thought was correct and thought was true, you also have to figure out what was actually true. So you have to double your resources, you're doubling your expenditures, you're wasting resources and time. Whenever you're operating in a place of uncertainty, that's actually a better place to be, right? There's a difference between skepticism and suspicion, right? Skepticism is an analytical tool. It's acknowledging that we don't have all the information. It's for all plain purposes, it's an inquiry tool, right? We can inquire on different things, which actually tailors you to use your resources that you have more intelligently. Whereas skepticism, it's a biological tool that is created to close an open loop. Our brains don't like open loops. So it creates stories, right? You, I'm sure, know this very well. People love stories because they like closure. They don't like having an open loop because what an open loop means is uncertainty means possible danger. That's how our brain codes it.
Mm.
So that's actually a better place to be because you're actually looking at a closer to the real world, closer to fact, closer to truth than you are operating in a completely different area.
I completely agree with you. I think it's, you know, especially in big decision, we all remember the story, or some people maybe not know of the back in the day in during the Cuban Missile Crisis with the Russian submarine. That the guy could have just fired nuclear weapon, but he's like, no, I don't believe the information. You know, And on the other hand, when you have something like the Iraq War with a weapon of mass destruction, it's like, was it a good intel? Like, but did that really started the war? We don't know. That's a different conversation. But not relying in a right information, we see usually casualty of civilians pay the price. Unfortunately, it's always like that. So that's why the work of uh, people in your group is very important, because if it's just a little bit not right, you can end up hitting school, or starting a war, or not starting a war. you know so what about I always struggle with this. I always wanted to ask somebody like you about this. So you have information that you want to lead uh, to something big. Like you collected information, analyze it, and all that, and the decision has to be made to make something big. You give it to the leaders responsible to do that. They're going to make the decision. Now, what is the point where like they share with the public? Because usually the public is going to be against anything. So it's like, how do you? What's what's the like area between black and white where you can share that information without sacrificing the intelligence itself.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to you really need to understand of what's the purpose of intelligence before you can try and make any sort of argument on if that should even be shared with the public, right? So what intelligence really is at its core is an information advantage that the threats, the adversary, the person on the other side of the negotiation table isn't aware that we know about them or what is occurring, right? So it's an information advantage. The purpose of having that information advantage has a shelf life, right? It means it can only exist for a certain period of time. But the way that we collected it, from who we collected it, how we collected it, if that becomes known to the public just by releasing that we even know that piece of information, that leaves our entire country or our methods or our techniques completely vulnerable. Meaning,
Or the
if
person that provided that information to you.
yes, it can be a person, but let's use a very, very easy example here. If I tapped your cell phone, right, and you've only ever had a conversation with another person about a deal that you're going to make on the cell phone, and then I go into that deal already setting up on the specific, let's say, concession points that you spoke about on that cell phone. You know that cell phone is now bugged. You know it's a pipeline to the opposing party that isn't going to benefit you. So now you have the advantage on feeding information directly through that cell phone because you know it comes back to me,
Mm.
giving me a disadvantage in that negotiation. Now, that's the really, really crux of it. It has a shelf life. It's how we play our hands, how we play our cards, is whether or not it's going to be strategic in the short term and that's worth it, or if we're going to play the long game and if that's going to be worth it more for the American people.
Yeah, it's very fascinating world, because like you said, it's bunch of you collecting information while you know that they're trying to feed you wrong information, and everybody's playing that game. We talking about every single country, every single parts of the country. Like, it's so
Yeah.
much. So if we go back a little bit, I'm gonna talk about intelligence in a minute, what it really is. But can you tell us the importance of intelligence in times, not just the war? Obviously, the war is important, but the peace.
Yeah. So war is important in the fact that, like you kind of touched on a few points there, is whether or not you where the bombs drop is hitting a school versus hitting a valid military target, right? That's when intelligence fails and they got the wrong processes, the wrong information. They trusted the wrong people. Their processes were incorrect, right? That's tragedies. Now, in times of peace, it's the difference whether or not your economy can grow, because going back to that negotiation deal, everything inside of at statecraft, right, at the national level between countries, everyone focuses on essentially this lens of interests. If my interests align with yours, we consider ourselves allies. If my interests don't align with yours, we consider each other adversaries, right? Threats to each other's interests, potentially, right? Well, in peace, it's important to know what your adversaries are doing to subvert your interests. So, understanding what, let's say, China or Russia or Iran or several other terrorist organizations or whoever you want to describe that's in their interests that directly conflict with the United States national interests, those are all valid intelligence targets, right? Now, you can also see, and I would say just because you have valid interest towards your allies, that doesn't mean your allies are telling you the truth too, right? Just because your interests align doesn't mean they'll try and get a one up that benefits them more or do something else that also benefits them more. And their
Yeah.
secondary actions would actually subvert some of your interests. So for that reason, it's like having a whole bunch of friends and everyone has their own goals on how we're actually going to party tonight.
Hmm.
And knowing what everyone is doing kind of sets the stage on if how long you're going to stay at the party before Molotov cocktails start throwing around, right?
Yep, yep. I mean, this is exactly you put it perfectly. I cannot, wait for also the second part where we apply this to real life because I think it's so fascinating that you can use that information. So you touch on this about what intelligence is information, collecting information, not only good information but bad information because I guess you would say like, okay, this is a source of bad information, so I'm gonna keep them, but I know that this is information they want to feed me or something. But we live in a world with like, the social media, AI, like you can have a bug like that. Like, how do you? I'm sure it's much different than before, like when you used to see in movies and stuff like that, where somebody like try to like put the bug in the office or get information from person, but how much you rely on humans versus technology.
Yeah, so in a national scale or so there's different sectors of intelligence. I'll start there. You have government, you have corporate, and then you also have private, which essentially anyone can hire people, let's say like me, to go and do a particular endeavor. Now, you have different types of intelligence, right? And I'm not going to go into because there's a huge exhaustive list, but there's three big types. There's signals intelligence, which is what you're talking about with your cell phone and hearing things and that kind of stuff. You have geospatial or geoint, which is think about satellites or particular images and how those things interrelate. And then you also have human intelligence, person to person, right? So those are our three like big umbrellas that you can break everything out into. So it's not really so much so as what is best or what is most useful. It's how can we actually get the information that where that information resides. Does it reside in a person's mind? And are they the easiest way to get that information? Would use a human intelligence officer or a case officer or someone like that. Now, if that information is easier to access through, let's say, a cell phone, because someone's talking around a cell phone, you just turn the microphone on and then you hear it, right? Versus just what we call all source intelligence, or and it's essentially an amalgamation or a combination of multiple different kinds, where you can look at all these different sources and where these things overlap. It senses to be what we call corroboration, is a tendency towards being validated as a more likely chance of being true.
Yeah, it does intelligence also work on like how much information you think they know about us, or is it just we collecting as much information as possible?
Yeah, so there's a spectrum, right? So part of what intelligence is understanding how what we call perception versus perspective. This is a really cool idea that I like to share. Perception is how you view the world, right? The lens that you're looking at. As an American, as a male, as someone between the age of 25 and 45, right? You all have this lens, whether or not you lived on the East Coast or the West Coast. You look at the world a little differently. Now, you can imagine how different that is from the average person that's in America to the average person that's in the Middle East. Their worldview is radically different. But the advantage lies in when that person in America realizes their perception and is able to actually change the lens and
Mhm.
gain perspective of how the other person sees Americans. Because then they have what's called information superiority. That allows them to make better informed decisions because they understand how their adversary starts to see them too.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because and this is again, you can just apply it in life. We always say like try to see it from the point of view of somebody else, when you do it. I feel like what like intelligence was always important, but it used to be you know, collecting information about how many planes they have, how many missiles they have. We're talking about war. And then based on that and the calculation, you start the war if you when you know that you have certain advantage. How long does it take them to take the weapon from the one side to the other or whatever? Now so that was, maybe the backdrop of the war. But now the war starts with intelligence. Like, okay, we know what Khomeini is. So this is the chance. This is when we start. So it has moved so rapidly that intelligence now is the most important thing in war, even more than weapons. Because we see, like, for example, this in Ukraine actually started, I think, with the little drones that cost nothing, versus big missile, and they can hit just based on information and hit more damage than millions of dollars. What's your thoughts on that? That intelligence now is everything, pretty much.
Yeah, well, I think it sort of always was.
Mm.
It's always been the advantage, right? People in the business sector knows this. People in the economic sector knows this, right? The more information you have, and specifically the information that allows you tailored access to what is likely to occur, is you have all the cards facing you, right? You just choose which to play in which order. That's where the advantage is. So I would make an ironic joke here that I'll steal from Sun Tzu because every military strategist studies Sun Tzu, right?
Yeah.
If you understand yourself, you might win a battle. If you understand your enemy, you might win more battles. But when you understand yourself and the enemy, you understand exactly how to create or should I say, initiate a war before the war even begins. You know how to win it because you know how to affect their logistics. You understand how to affect how they perceive what the war is, how they even view their own government, how they view each other within discussing the war, right? So intelligence is incredibly powerful. That gives you so many different advantages. The only thing I would say here is I don't think we use it enough in policies. While you saw this with the director of national intelligence say one thing one month, directly contradict the president the
Yeah.
second month, and then change their story the third month. You saw this 180 cycle, right?
Yeah.
360-degree cycle here, turn around completely on what was being said versus what was being independently validated. And there's so many contradictions here. And I think for the average person, right? So, like people in your audience, when they understand how to actually apply what we call the intelligence continuum, which is the sequence in which data actually transforms into intelligence, when they understand how to actually use this, they effectively can learn how to protect their own mind in the modern day
Mm.
because their brain is not created to understand the volume or the pace of information that their brain is being overloaded with.
Um, there is another point that I want to discuss because I feel like this is very important, and we touched on it a little bit when we talked about like looking at it from the different lenses of the world, or even in the city. So when collecting information is one thing, but I feel like we're still lacking the understanding of the information, and that always happens, I believe, in for some reason it always happened in the Middle East, maybe because all the wars are there. But I mean, it also kind of happened with the Ukraine war. Like they always have this misinformation about, or not misinformation, misunderstanding of the information. It's like, oh, once Saddam Hussein is gonna collapse, everything is gonna be okay. The people are gonna rise. And but anybody that grew up there, they were like, no, it's not like that at all. It's not gonna happen. Oh, Ukraine is not gonna after a few people, they're gonna just give up. Nope, it's not. So I think there's the information is usually great, but there's a lack of understanding the information. How do you agree with that? And why is that a problem and how we can fix it?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem, and I think how we fix it is better intelligence, and it's better intelligence processes. So like a lot of things, regardless of what country you work for as an intelligence officer, we all go through a series of rigorous trainings on crafting our minds a more analytical way, a way that leans on reality and human nature than it does on how we perceive reality, right? So the way that we fix this, right? So in the case of Ukraine, we failed for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons was cultural intelligence, was tactical guerrilla intelligence, understanding the drive and the secondary, what I mentioned before is cascading effects. There wasn't enough information about how these people actually think, the nationalism of these people, the strategy behind them, or the backing and willingness to gain more assets, gain support, rally support for their cause,
And you also
right?
mentioned before something huge, how they view us as Americans.
Yes.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think the average American has no understanding what someone in Europe or someone in Africa or in South America views Americans. They're too busy thinking about themselves and their own selfish interests than how other people see us. And that's where essentially like all communication with other nations start to break down, right? Any sort of way of dialogue breaks down because we don't understand how they view us. And that's what's happening with our politicians right now. We're trying to strong arm, and strong arm works in short form temporarily, but in long form, for a lot of reasons, it just tends towards failure.
And also,
So
like a lot of people don't understand that, people view us based on the information that they provided. So it's not like oh, America's great, democracy, all this. It's not what they see. What they see, what they told, and what they fed, during or what they experienced. I mean, if you live near school and it was blow up, it's like, oh my God, it's the devil. If you look at the TV and all you get information is like how bad, like kind of what we get about North Korea, like we don't really know North Korea, right? It's information that we have. So we have to make sure that we understand that culture too, which we touched on it a little bit, because I feel like a lot, especially when they were like during the hunt of bin Laden, I always thought that it's like offering money was never gonna be the solution, because the culture there doesn't do that.
yeah.
They don't get it's an honor culture. So they're like, oh, I would never, it has to relate in other kind of information, which exactly how we got them later.
Yeah, and I see the problem here is how we actually fix it because people in the intelligence community learn these lessons, right? We understood after the first time we tried to establish a democracy in a Muslim culture, it's not going to work,
Yeah.
right? It's not going to work. So we learned those lessons in the intelligence community. But again, to go back to what we were mentioning before, it supports a decision maker. Just because the decision maker sees the intelligence and we can understand what is likely to occur, it is still up to the decision maker, which isn't really trained to think like an intelligence officer,
I
to
just
make
want
those
to, yeah,
decisions.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say like they're not trained to think like us.
Yeah.
So while they may be very intelligent people, they are masters in their craft and masters in politics from for the most part. They're not people who really take in intelligence But when you see that and they're willing to actually leverage the intelligence function, you see entire governments change. You see entire ways of democracy change, not inwardly, but outwardly, relationally, where we do find win-win scenarios. We do see where we can take large amounts of information advantage that benefits the United States. And you see that we make good choices both in the short and long term. But it's whether or not the American people elect the people who are going to do that.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify one thing is, when we say, the Middle East is not ready for democracy, what I meant, or, is they not ready for our kind of democracy,
Mhm.
because everybody have their own democracy, their own, so, because I feel a lot of times like, oh, people don't understand that the Middle East will never be, actually there's a lot of places in the Middle East, that's very advanced. And this is another thing that people don't understand. When you go to Saudi Arabia, it's different than you go to Sudan. If you go to United Arab Emirates, it's different than you go to Yemen. Egypt is even parts within Egypt. So when we say, I feel the problem is we trying to feed them our experience as American culture, and that's always fails because people tell you like, well, you're not doing too good yourself in terms of that, so why you want to lecture us? So I always feel like anything has to change. Kind of have to have like the French Revolution. It has to happen within. You cannot come and force somebody. Like you said, it's going to be over a short period of time. You can use the toughness, but then you have to let them be. But that's why understanding the intelligence is very important. And everything that you said, it's so interesting how we can apply to real life, which understanding people and stuff like that. But just to touch a little bit more on that intelligent world, and then we go, how, like, why are we still making the same mistakes? In terms of like, we have much more intelligence now. We have much more, um, you know, uh, advances in technology, and all that, and we still make mistakes where we you know hit a school or make a decision based on, oh, hey, he's gonna collapse, the country's gonna collapse after he collapsed, and stuff like that. Why are we still making, is it leaders problem? Because I don't think it's the information problem, to be honest. I think, do you ever like after provide something, I know you can talk about that a lot, but you provide some information and a leader make a decision and you're like, it's not what I said, it's not what I told you, So because I believe it's like a leader's problem, because you look at this, maybe not just the leaders, the people surround, the yes men around them, those people. I think that's the problem. What do you think?
Yeah. So personally, what I've seen, people have their own agendas once they get past a certain point in any level within a business, within a corporation, within the government, right? They have their own interests and they're looking out for their own interests. They have their own agendas, whatever those are, whether it's not making their own money or putting themselves in a better position of power. So, not to say everyone's like that, because that's not what I'm saying, and I don't want that to be misconstrued. But people look out for themselves. And I will also say intelligence is very much like a 100-piece puzzle where you don't know what it looks like. You might know three-quarters of it with the intelligence that you gathered. And based upon the time that you have to estimate what the rest of the puzzle looks like to communicate that picture to the person who has to make a decision on what that puzzle is. So, with that said, you don't always have all of the information. You have nuggets of information that kind of tell the story of what exactly is occurring, what they care about, what they don't care about, what's beneficial, what's not beneficial, what is productive for our own interests, and also counterproductive for our own interests. But that leaves room for interpretation, and that wrong or incorrect interpretation, they misconstrued what language means. So everyone inside the intelligence community, we learned this back in 2001, where we have shared vocabulary now, but even within our own organizations, we have different vocabulary. So what likely means a very specific thing in the intelligence community. What it means for an average everyday person is very different from what a politician hears, right? And given that, they're still going to serve their interests. They're still going to drive their own agendas, whether or not that's the agendas that's beneficial for the United States and for the American people, or for what they're trying to accomplish. That's sort of the gap between the world of intelligence and the decision maker.
Yeah, and I feel they always rely on, oh, you don't have all the information. You haven't seen my files, that's secret files. I'm making the right decision, but I don't think it is. I think it's a lot. It's exactly what you say. Their own policies, their own agenda that they want to go. I don't think anyone is evil in terms of like they want to do something evil. I think they want to, protect our interest in a certain way that they want, that they think it's right, but sometimes it is evil. It's not their intention maybe, but it is. Um, so last couple of questions in this half, and then we're gonna go to how we can do this in the our personal life. Um, all the spy movies and stuff that we see, and which I'm gonna ask at the end of the episode, which one got it right? Spy shows and TV and movies and stuff like that. But uh, it always used to rely on money, uh, sex, and scandals. How much is that still the way to pursue someone to get information from or fear, obviously, you know? So either scandal based on fear, you tape them doing something or saying something or being gay or sleeping with someone or whatever that, gonna trigger them in their own culture. They'd be like, okay, so how much of that is still in play?
I think that's very much in play.
Yeah.
What you're leaning there is core motivators, and in the world of human intelligence, we have
I feel core motivator is like a mob term. Like I'm gonna motivate him a little bit.
yeah. So you could think of it like a coin, right? The difference between manipulation and motivation is really the person who is using it and why they're using it, right? You have you have reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. Not egotistical, but how someone sees themselves, right? So even like Mother Teresa had ego. It's how she embodied her own vision of herself, right? So we have reward, which is not necessarily money, but it can be an emotional reward or validation, right? While that is part ego, you see most people have a blend of these different core motivators. Reward is that gratification that someone gets. Most of the time, it's money. A lot of times, it's what they do in exchange, right? It's in an exchange what that money does for them. So it might be sex, it might be resolving loneliness through some stripper or hooker, right? It might be focus and attention that they want through cocaine or whatever else, right? You have ideology, which is, I think, people tend to think like religion or anything else. People should also think nationalism or local cultural identity, right? Things that are instilled in you at a very young age. That is also part of your ideology. You have coercion that I'm sure everyone understands is blackmail, but the best version of coercion is when that person doesn't know that they're being coerced. Because once someone understands that they're being coerced, all trust is broken and you essentially burn that asset. You can't really interact with them other than more coercion because they can't trust you, or they don't trust you, should I say. And then you have ego, is how someone views themselves and playing into that where it either benefits your interests or it benefits both of your interests. And that's really the difference between manipulation and motivation.
Yeah, for a minute there when you were talking, it reminded me of like an interview I did with somebody that worked undercover in like a white supremacy gang, and it's the undercover is a lot like your work as well, like spies and collecting information and decision making and stuff like sometimes when you are in a horrible situation and you're embedded deep down, you're gonna encounter some bad things, but you have to let it go because you were looking for the big picture. So same thing with spying, I guess. Like sometimes you see like bad things, but you can't like you want to make the world a better place, I think, in the big picture. So that's what you do. Um, Now, last question in this segment, and that working in the intelligent world, you know, Did you find yourself when you start to become civilian trust people more or less? And does your mind still calculating on doing stuff? I have a friend of mine who I interviewed, Ben Anderson. I don't know if you know him. He's a war journalist, one of the most famous war journalists, and he always like goes, but he still cannot sit with his back to the door. Like these are little things that his brain always working. So how did you find have any problems when you move in from your role to civilian work?
I would say yes and no to that question,
Okay.
in different ways, right? So professionals are trained to think in terms of likelihoods and probabilities. What is a real threat versus what am I perceiving as a threat? And untrained people can't really distinguish the difference, right? They only perceive threats. They don't know what is an actual threat. So the person who sits where their back can't be towards the door, is that because they just can't distinguish if they're actually in a threatening environment or someone is actively targeting them? Or is it because something happened in their past and they're projecting that on into the now, right? So like trauma in that case, right, is a good thing because it forces someone as a survival mechanism to increase their safety, right? So not all trauma is bad trauma. I would say while everyone has parts of trauma, the things that are productive and doesn't take away from their resources are good things. So all the things that military people do or intelligence officers do, the trained person understands and he puts it through this filter process on what is a real threat, understanding what time, what location, what things are actually in the environment that can harm me or be a challenge to me. And then you address it accordingly. Do I need body armor? Do I need a weapon? Do I need to not position myself in this circumstance? How can I recon the area before I go into that area, for example? So I'll say there's parts that you want to bring with you into the civilian world because it benefits you and it keeps you safe. There's other things that aren't really necessary, but all professionals go through this filter process, understanding the difference between real threats versus perceived threats.
All right. All right, excellent. Now let's move on. I mean, we can talk about this forever, but I feel like just to sum it up is, intelligence is the most important thing in any decision making in time of war and peace. And you collect all these information. Sometimes, the leaders get it wrong. And obviously it's painful and it's based on their own agenda and politics and all that. But that doesn't take away from the intelligence itself is very, very important, and how you calculate it. Now, if you look at it, you can apply this to your real life and businesses and relationships. I wasn't going to add relationships. And then I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, you know what? It's actually, if you look at like dating apps or even if you watch like some, you always want to know what the other person like or don't like or, enjoy or hate. So it's all about information. So relationship actually, so you could be a relationship coach too, you see? So tell us, first of all, when did you realize that you should bring this to the real life? And tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll talk about, how to apply this to real life business and relationship.
Yeah, so I was developing the curriculums for the Army intelligence officers. And I realized there's a lot of things that are here that I want to see America grow. I want to see the average person modernize their thinking because they're running on biological devices that predates the 20th century, right? The average person, unless they're highly educated and taken very specific classes, only get a fraction of what is taught for an intelligence officer to understand what the reality is, whether it be relationally, whether it be in terms of planning or in operations or anything like that. It was a radical change for me to understand when you apply the same skills that intelligence officers do in your everyday life, you can start winning at work a whole lot easier. You can start making progress on your personal endeavors a lot easier. You can understand yourself and your partner and your child and your coworker and your boss a whole lot easier. And pressing all of the right buttons, turning the right dials makes everyone, your interest and theirs, becomes what we call a win-win scenario, right? And there's exponential return, what we call a guaranteed 300% return on any endeavor that you're going to do because of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, The Art of War, a great book. And I feel like it's not even about war sometimes. Like it's about life, but information is very important. So that's when you realize that you can use that in the real life. So now beside you're working with the intelligent officers and the new generation, you also coach or work with business owners and leaders and stuff like that. So how do you um, take make them understand the difference between their ego, not in the way that you described ego before, but they're actually in a bad way, their ego, and follow the information? Because a lot of times we have the information about, like, okay, I want to open a business, I need to collect all the information, see if this is happening. Like, how do you approach them that way?
How do you approach an individual and
Yeah,
understanding the
the
whole of that
import the
individual?
importance of information versus anything else that they have.
Yeah, so let me explain this concept, what we call the intelligence continuum, because I think it'll be super powerful for everyone who hears it. And it's actually the first lesson that I teach in a program that I instruct now called Skunk Works. The intelligence continuum, we've been using the word information for everything, right? For data, we use the word information, for knowledge, for intelligence. We've been using this word in this conversation interchangeably, but they're very, very different words and they mean very specific things. Data, think of a random data points, right? It has no context. It is simply words and things, facts that occurred, right? That is data. It's not necessarily organized, but whenever you organize this information, data, and you process it through context, that is whenever you're able to actually discern what we call information. Information is structured. Information allows you to have context about something, but information itself is useless. So understanding what if someone likes ice cream and a particular flavor of ice cream doesn't really mean all that much. But whenever you understand that they like strawberry because it reminds them of whenever they were a kid and their mother, who's dead now, always shared them with a strawberry ice cream. Now that is some really good information to know because it applies context, meaning to that piece of data. It's structured around a perception and understanding. Whenever you move information and you apply through experience, you develop what we call knowledge. People think knowledge is just having information. Just because you know someone likes strawberry ice cream doesn't mean that you have knowledge about that. The knowledge comes in when if I know that that person really likes this strawberry ice cream and it makes them feel a certain emotion, I can present that to them and trigger that emotion very instantaneously where I now set conditions where that person is receptive. So whenever my partner becomes really, really upset, the thing that will comfort them is strawberry ice cream,
Mm.
right? So then that's whenever it becomes really powerful. But we're not done yet, right? We still have intelligence. When you take that knowledge and you apply it to a very, very specific problem that is in a given time window, that is whenever you have intelligence. So when my partner is really upset, completely distraught, and at the verge of breaking down, and I go and take them to an ice cream shop, I don't tell them where we're going, and I get them a big old bowl of strawberry ice cream that regulates their entire emotional apparatus where they're not going and they're not falling off that cliff anymore, where you can bring them back into rational thought and communicate with them on understanding where they're at, right? That becomes incredibly powerful. You can see how this translates to business, how it translates to your partner, how it translates to your friends, right? It becomes incredibly powerful.
100%. It's, the information that you get, and this is, what a lot of people don't understand. Like, it's exactly how you break it down, like that difference between data, information, and knowledge. Are you a soccer fan?
A soccer fan,
Yeah.
I tried really hard, but I'm terrible at it. So I just watch it whenever I can. But
You're in Italy, man. You cannot not be a soccer fan. But the reason I say that is because there's a thing in soccer which is penalty kicks. If the game tends to be like tie at the end, they have penalty kicks, which is one a goalie stands and five takes shot, and whoever gets more. So it used to be the goalkeeper will jump left or right, whatever. They just guess. Now it's based on intelligent information. They will tell you this player will shoot at that area when he's stressed. If he goes first, he's going to shoot up here. If we lose it, so they have a little towel next to the bottle of water and they look, and this is again the information. So now he can be a soccer coach too. See, I'm getting you a lot of jobs.
there you go.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
look at it and and this is based on information. They look at that player 1,000 times, and every time when he was down or injured or tired or whatever, he shoots this way or that way. He goes right, he goes left. And it's the same thing in basketball. There's like, okay, when down the line, we don't want that player to have the ball. We want that player to have the ball. So the information, the data is collected, and then from that you get the information, and then you get the knowledge. So that's exactly kind of like what you do, and that's why you can apply it in everything. So tell
Yep.
us, what is it? Tell us about your business. What do you do with business? Let's start with the business people first.
Yeah, so I just want to go back just for a second,
Sure.
because I want to answer your question. Your original question is, how do you know if someone lies to you? How do you know if you can trust someone, right? Well, whenever you, let's say, in an interview with someone, you have that one data point about that person, that interaction, what they said, and what all this other stuff. That's not information. While you might discover information through that interaction, you have one data point. But over time, if I look at that person's social media, if I looked at their LinkedIn profile, if I talked about who this person is with their references and cross-referenced and asked other people in that organization, how did they perform? How did this person think? Now I start having a bunch of different data points.
Mm.
I can understand that consistency. So I can understand when someone is on the left side of the field versus the right side of the field, how they're going to perform, right? That's the value of intelligence and how it relates to the business world. Exactly just that. How does your adversaries perform? How do your own coworkers perform? How do your employees perform? So when you're able to extract all of these pieces of data, you can start doing what we call due diligence. We can start doing what's called risk assessments. We can start doing what's called preemptive intelligence or preemptive analysis. We can do a variety of different things. Anticipatory intelligence is understanding what is going to happen in the future, near future, based upon indicators. If these three or five things pop up, data points that are observable, we know that this scenario is very, very likely to occur. It's highly likely to occur. That's the value of business. Now, if you can understand that inside of your own employees, inside your own processes, it's incredibly powerful and game changing, I tell you, for
So
every single person that I interacted with.
yeah. Who like hires you the most? Like which business will be like, okay, this is what we want you. We're gonna hire you. What would be the job? What is it that you do in businesses? Do you start like before they start the business, while the business is thriving or losing, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, so for me personally, so what you're talking about is a bit of corporate intelligence or private intelligence, depending. So in the world of private intelligence, it's doing due diligence, meaning understanding the landscape or the environment that a business is about to move into,
Mm,
right? So you can understand who are the actual threats, who are your potential allies, what areas are really good for what we call market intelligence, where if you placed your specific business location within this grid square, right, you stand a 25% more chance of making profit than you would in this other grid square, right? So you see this, Amazon does this, Google does this, large corporations do this. That is in the private world. A lot of due diligence, a lot of market analysis, that kind of stuff, understanding threats and landscapes. While for the corporate sector, there's a lot of understanding your own employees and your own processes, getting those things better, and then how can you create a faster turnover for customers or lead generation, getting more people to look at your business, and then selecting from those people that look at it, how can we turn those people into customers and repeat customers as fast as possible, that builds trust and the life of that customer is extended with that business.
mm. So it's the same concept of collecting a lot of data and then turn it to information and then turn it to and then you give it to the decision makers or you do it yourself.
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, so we create reports. We have small groups. So we do keynote speaking. We do cohorts or workshops. And we do all three of those things.
Okay. So what about a decision making when you uncertain, when you don't have the information? Like how do you approach that? Because a lot of times we this whole episode we talked about information. What about lack of information? When you have nothing, what do you do? How do you not
So,
panic?
yeah, so lack of information isn't a bad thing. And that's where people will misconstrued or misunderstand. They think information, I have information, I can now do things with that information. And while that's true, information doesn't equate to action. And so there's two concepts I'd like to share with you here. There's passive collection and then there's active collection. Passive collection is just absorbing what is thrown at you, right? So it's your scrolling on your medias and everything that's happening. Active collection is whenever you actually what we call shaking the bush, for example. Imagine shaking a bush, and the act of shaking that bush makes birds fly out, makes rodents run away, and then you know what was in that bush. So active collection is actually doing something in the environment that changes other people's reactions. They react to what you're acting on. So their reaction creates information that you can observe. When you pair these two with what we call Jahari, you have known knowns, meaning you know the information that you already know and you're aware of. You have unknown knowns, which is you don't know what is out there, but you know things are being said. And then you have unknown unknowns, things that you don't know that's out there and you don't know what's being said. So you also have known unknowns, which means the things that you know that's out there, you just don't have the information yet. So for instance, for the people who are in the South, we're coming up near the beginning of or should I say the end of fire season and sort of hurricane season, right? You know that that's out there and information that is out there. You know it's not the right time to go and research what is going to be happening. So you might turn on the news every once in a while. You might subscribe to a particular newsletter that lets you know dangers that are in your area. But you know that you don't need to collect that information right now. So it's passive, right? Where if an alert does alert you to something, then you know you can act upon it, right? Versus you knowing that let's say on your Friday night for people, where the nearest checkpoint is going to be for DUI inspections, and you don't have the time to go through a 30-minute inspection and walk around your car to prove that you're sober, right? So active collection would look like, hey, I know there's potential construction or checkpoints that are out there. I can go ahead and look that up really quickly through a quick search, identify where those things at, and I can move to where I need to move to faster. So your taxis in New York, your taxis in San Francisco, understand this deeply on active versus passive collection. They have things that are automatically pushed to them passively, and they know what to go look for and who to talk to get information on what's occurring in their area.
What's your thoughts on collecting information from social media? Because social media is based on deception, pretty much. You know, people
Yeah.
showing up things that they the happiest, they look great, they look like filters. You know, I have a friend of mine, he always like put this in the best party. He owns a place and he's like, I'm in the party. It's like I text him, you're there. It's like, oh no, I'm in bed. You know, it's like so it's all about that, and people get the information and people react to information that they don't know. So what's your thoughts on how much you use social media to influence people one way in businesses, but also like to how much of that is real information that you can use?
Yeah, so what you're really talking about is how does intelligence use what's called social media intelligence, right? Or social intelligence. And what actually happens for people who are watching this need to understand everything on social media, everything on the internet should be treated as a data point. Nothing on the internet should be treated as information. And that's going to sound crazy to people, but when you treat one piece of information, right, what you presume as information, an article, a newsletter, a independent scroll on Instagram, that thing you need to treat as a data point. Just because you have a series of data points that's saying very similar things, that doesn't mean that information is corroborated. That doesn't mean that that is truth. That it just means is, are you looking at only English speaking or allied based news, right? Are you following the same four people who follow each other and you have what's called circular reporting,
Mm.
right? So you can see how what you think is information that's sharing across multiple different people that seemingly aren't connected are actually people citing each other's sources where one person heard it from another person. And then now you have 20 people saying the same thing that's all complete BS. So you have to do your due diligence and understand that they're just data points. And those data points doesn't mean truth. It just means that you have now an informational concept that you can set over here. But whenever you go and look at the broad spectrum of what is out there, that is whenever you can start seeing these pockets of information actually aren't closely related.
Yeah, 100%. I feel when I said back in the day that information is important in businesses and real life and relationship, I just want to empathize is like when I say information you learn about somebody else is to see if they are good for you, not to change yourself to be likable to them or become a psycho or stalker. Like, because I remember the show. Have you seen the show You?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you know how he gets all this information and data and stuff, and then make it for love it. So don't be a psycho. It's not what I meant. I meant find your right perfect person.
Yeah, that guy's a
but
little on the deep end, but intelligence officer kind
but
of, right?
but
Professional
yeah,
stalker.
isn't he? Yeah. So last two questions. One is in terms of as intelligent officer, who got it right from the shows or movies that you've seen all over? I tell you my favorite, and you tell me if it's right. Homeland.
Yeah,
What do
yeah, I
you
would say
think?
that's the closest. I would say that's
Oh,
the closest.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's part of the closest, and I think, and people are gonna say, "Oh, this dude's complete BS." Recruit, the old school Recruit. Now, there's some aspects that I think the new Netflix series, The Recruit, did well. it's still very Hollywood-esque. What I think they did very, very well is the conversational language, the elicitation, the extraction. I think they did that part very well, but the shooting, the gun runnings, and all of that kind of stuff, not so much. But I think Homeland, I think would be the most accurate of the different TV series. I think also one really good series that most people haven't ever heard of is called The Pine Gap or Pine Gap. If you ever heard of it, it's the NSA version
Mm.
of co in cohorts with the Australian version of NSA in Australia overlooking the Indo-Pacific. I think they do a lot of things well. I wouldn't say all of it is true, but uh, it gives you a scope of how real world intelligence, they have HUMINT there, they have SIGINT, they have GEOINT, they have IMINT, they have all kinds of different versions of intelligence that they do really good. There's just a little Hollywood-esque about it, right?
Okay. How did you get into this? How did you become an intelligent officer?
Yeah, so actually, I enlisted in the military when I was 17 as an analyst, and I thought, well, I didn't know an analyst at first. I heard human intelligence, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. And they said, well, you could be James Bond. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do James Bond. So at 17, I signed my life away, but it wasn't as a human intelligence person because they put me as an analyst. And so as I became an analyst, I really understood it was really just about looking at maps and thinking real hard and really complex ways. Uh, I was like, man, this kind of it ain't living up to the hype.
What is a
Uh,
martini?
yeah, where's the martini at? And the hot chicks and the fast cars? That's what I signed up for.
Yeah, good.
And eventually, I was tapped on the shoulder to become an intelligence officer from the enlisted side to an officer. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. I'm all into this intelligence thing. I love it. And as time went on, through one of my previous deployment, I was in the Middle East where a agency officer tapped me on the shoulder, said, "Hey, you need to reach out to this guy whenever you're on the back end, back stateside." And that's whenever I made contact with Andrew Bustamante, Everyday Spy, and sort of transitioned towards private intelligence. And also, I moved over into actually developing the curriculums for the next generation of intelligence officers out for the U.S. Army.
Yeah. My
And
my
that's kind
my
of
parents are Egyptian, but I was born in Kuwait, and I think during the Gulf War, I think that was the best time of where you use intelligence and information in times of peace, because even though it was wartime, but the coalition between the Saudi and the Gulf states and the United States Army, I remember I read so many books, Schwarzkopf book even, when he was like, how do you deal with different culture and you still have respect? Like, for example, putting your feet on a stool is disrespectful. And so that kind of information, they had all that information before they even meet. So that can go a long way, even in a culture wise, like in a human level. So, so my last question to you, and I'll answer it first, is like, what do you want the audience to take away from this? If you use two things, one as as an intelligent officer in an intelligent world, and the other one as a civilian that teaches all this. For me, I think the main thing, I learned so much, but I think the main thing for me is like when you look at all the stuff that you consume, it's data, it's not information. I never thought of it that way. um, and also the circle of people. If you have, so many people have the same information, it's not, I mean, it's not information, it's data, and it's just circled in. So I think that's the first thing, is you collect data and then turn it to information, turn it to a knowledge, and then turn it to something. So I think for me, that's huge. I think that's one of the many things that I took from this. But what would you want the people to take, one, in the intelligent world, especially in this time where people see war and all these horrible things happening, and like it seems like it's nonstop, and then one as leaders in interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, I would just reiterate skepticism versus suspicion. The world tells you and leans into marketing has proven to be beneficial for not suspicion, but having the focus on the distruths that you presume as a truth, knowing the difference between, if I had to sum it up into one thing, the difference between assumption and assessment. People will view a lot of different things, whether it be in their personal lives, whether it be on social media, whether it be in their professional lives, based upon how they are perceiving the world and all of their experience and their feelings and all of this thing. Whenever you have an emotion, whatever emotion, if you're not neutral, you are already biased and you're looking through a lens. That lens has been crafted by your upbringing and everything else, and you're making assumptions. You might not even know that you're making assumptions, but you are making assumptions about what you think you know, and also subconsciously you're not even aware of. That's the first thing that you need to understand. There's a difference between assumptions and assessment. Assessments is having that open loop. It's not letting your brain close in the loop and tell yourself a story. It's saying that just maybe this is true, maybe it is false. Having that suspicion is one thing towards assumption. Having skepticism is looking at inquiry, right? That skepticism is allowing you to gain an assessment. You assess always and continuously. You never come to a conclusion. While you can have skepticism and what you can assess as likely to occur, when you understand the difference between assumption and assessment, you're going to start leaning into assessment more and more, and you're going to catch yourself more and more in assumptions.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think one of the things that I do, especially in this crazy world, is I always do that. And I try to see it through the lens of other people. Unfortunately, people are already tribal. It's kind of like sports now. It becomes, you root for your team regardless winning or losing, right or wrong. You just root for them. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the world has become, especially like in the Gaza war, when people are like, how can you not see the amount of children that, like, how is that? Put yourself, like, if I was horrified on October 7th about what happened, how can you not be horrified about what happened after that? Like, it just like put yourself in that lens, see through the other people's lens and feelings as well. Not only that.
Yep.
Um, if and also the other thing is like and now Trump was touching on it a little bit with the AI images and videos and stuff. Do you even trust the data that you collect or the information that you have? Because the Iranian was showing that they destroyed Abraham Lincoln like a aircraft. I was like, what? And even Trump believed it, and he called the criminal. It's like, did we? It's like,
Yeah.
no, nobody came. So you have to be. It's your responsibility to not take any things that you see and believe it. Just exactly what you said. Make some research, do it, or then it's exactly what you said. You just taken aside already. Um, this has been great. We can talk for hours. Would love to have you back again. If people want to find you or follow you or ask you a question or hire you or do anything, where can they go and follow you or contact you?
Yeah, so I'm actually one of the instructors for a program inside of Everyday Spy called Skunkworks. So you can message right there at Everyday Spy, or you can message me directly at Trenton, which is my first name, at everydayspy.com. And that is my direct link there. By all means, I'm not on any social medias, as you can assume. While I do have accounts to look at what's out there, I don't have any personal medias currently. So that may change in the future as I continue moving forward more into this public space. But as of right now, yeah, Everyday Spy is where you'll find me.
And we'll have all the links for Everyday Spy. You are actually the second guest that I get from the Everyday Spy family, and they all awesome. I'll have all the links in the description so you can follow him and find him and do whatever you any questions or anything. But there's so much to learn in this episode, and I hope that you learn from it. So thank you very much. It's been awesome having you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Live from America podcast. This has been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is good. It's funny. I'll tell you a quick story. Let me try to stop recording here. Uh,